Okay, good morning everyone. My name is Dan McGraw. This is Henry Stewart Day 2. And I'd like to welcome you to our talk about meeting user expectations, the ultimate KPI. Over the last few years, I've worked on many asset management initiatives for large corporations, production studios, ad agencies, quite a few nonprofits. And this morning we'll be talking about user expectations and its value to the success of an overall initiative. First, a quick story. Early in my career, I was a producer at a TV station, a pretty small TV station, and we didn't have anything that would manage all aspects of a production, like a production book. We didn't have anything, so I decided that I would build one electronically. It held the budget, the cast and crew, the schedule, all the phases from production all the way to post-production and distribution specifications. I spent weeks on this thing, getting it just right, staying late after work, talking to other producers, editors, and tweaking it here and there. And after a bit more time, I was done with it. People told me it was impressive, that it would help manage productions better, that it would allow better scheduling and measurement. It was really powerful. I rolled it out and explained to everyone how it worked, and after about 3 weeks, it was great, except for one thing: nobody was using it. And I was really troubled by it, and I learned a pretty hard lesson about it, and I learned about this group that were called the users. And one lesson that I learned was that users are people. They have needs and they have wants. And just because I think I know how everyone needs to work or how they should work doesn't mean that they do or they will. They are men and women who are just like you and me. So we have to ask ourselves questions like, what do men want? Of course, there are a few other things we could put on this list, but these are, some things that I think men might want. And what about women? That might be a more dangerous question, and we might actually be here all day. But what are users? What do users want? And how much of an emphasis do we place on satisfying the user? So we're here at Henry Stewart. We go to this conference. We walk through the technology. We sit through a lot of different, sessions. And so we may be asking ourselves, like, what do I really need to know? What do I really need to know about asset management? Why is this software package better than that software package? They all sound great. What the heck's a taxonomy? What have others done to deal with in terms of launching a damn initiative? How much should it cost? And finally, how do organizations succeed from a user perspective and a financial perspective? So in this talk, we're going to look about users and how that all affects some of those. What do they want? What are they influenced by? And how it impacts a digital asset management and workflow initiative. So let's start by talking about what asset management is and is not. So, you hear a lot of things about asset management, and it's a little bit like a griffin. It's got a head of a lion, or a head of an eagle, a body of a lion, the wings of a hawk. It's kind of a hard thing to explain. And if you do asset management every day, it's difficult to tell your family and your friends what it is you do, because it is a little bit of a hybrid of sorts. And so you might hear that it's a better way to store stuff, or it's a way to improve security. It might be confused as a distribution platform, or it might be just a website or a system. Now, it may contain all of these, but really, fundamentally, if you walk out of Henry Stewart with nothing else, I hope you realize that DAM is a business strategy. It affects and impacts most areas within an organization if it's done correctly. And it has to be considered as a fundamental business strategy, for any organization, not just the marketing department, not just a media company, not just the creative departments. It can affect and influence nearly every part. It can affect finance and sales and marketing and legal, creative production, a lot of other ones, and including human resources, believe it or not. So if you look at these groups, and you were to invite, you were going to have a dinner party, would you invite people from all of these groups to your dinner party? And in a sense, that's kind of what we're doing. We're inviting users from each of these groups to join our damn party. And some just don't want to come. It would be difficult to talk about how each of those groups that I mentioned, how the user perspective from each of the groups I mentioned affect the success of a damn initiative within the time I have. But here's something to think about. This is a perspective on how to look at this. Not so many years ago, the world was based on physical media. We had had photographs on things like paper. We had CDs, we had videotapes, video discs, we had video stores, we had music stores, we had mail order music stores, we had a music business. And we really don't have to go into much detail about how we had at one time only a handful of networks, and today we have more than we can count. And it's a whole different world today. And so it's changed for users too. It's really about connecting how users think into how users will act and what they will be attracted to. And to illustrate this, I'll go into what we see today that, if you think about it, was really only a dream a few years ago. We have self-directed brand engagement and shopping experiences. We've all done it. I just bought a bunch of stuff on Amazon yesterday. We have instant connectivity to information and to people that we would normally never be able to link with. We have broad search capabilities and referral links. So if I look for coconuts, I get all kinds of referral links or predictive shopping capabilities. We have very fluid user experiences and interfaces that satisfy users. We have mobile internet and in-app purchasing, or we have mobile purchasing too. We can purchase things in our apps, in our games, online, kind of anywhere we want. And with Apple Pay and my new iPhone 6, I can spend money a lot faster. We have ubiquitous media consumption. We have cheap or free access to tools and storage. I just got this yesterday on my email. And we also have, if you think about all of the technology that goes into driving all of these, we have kind of inconspicuous back-end technology platforms that are invisible to the user. We make it a great experience for people to have a shopping experience that's great, but all of this stuff our users just don't care about. We have instant access to free or cheap information. We also have a social marketing world that users now understand and act upon. If they put that sign up 20 years ago, nobody would know what that was about. And so this is what we've gleaned from this kind of minute-long romp into what our typical experiences are today. But let's kind of put a new lens on this and highlight the real essence of what those expectations represent. So we have kind of a nice word bank here. We have self-directed, instant, predictive, fluid, intuitive, mobile, one-click, ubiquitous, connected, inconspicuous, and inexpensive. If you think about how maybe you operate, this is kind of what we want. We want this to be that experience. If it's not this, we'll go somewhere else. We'll find something else to satisfy us. And so we have to kind of look at this, and in terms of our asset management initiatives, we some of us might just say, you know what, so what? So what if our users want to get things right now? So what if they want it easy and they want it cheap? I mean, I had to go to California to go to a Henry Stewart conference and learn about asset management. I'm putting blood, sweat, tears, money, my time, I'm trying to get people convinced. I've put a lot of work into this. Don't they know that this is a great thing? We've got work to do. And they're lucky we're even talking about having some kind of a central place to put stuff. Oh, wait a second. It's not just a place to put stuff. It's actually a business strategy. And so we have to keep those in mind, that our users are the reason we're going to be successful. And we have to satisfy them, because what matters is user acceptance. So when our users really want to accept and use smart systems that satisfy them. The more strategy and resulting initiative, offers that satisfaction, that the areas that we mentioned here, the higher the acceptance level will be. Now, many organizations I've worked with have had at least 20 or so systems. Some, I'm talking about systems that hold assets, that hold metadata, that have some kind of a business process or a workflow. And, some have had, I stopped counting after 47. Some have over 100. So what can we say about user acceptance in those cases where there's a lot of systems? Well, you could say that there's a lot of user acceptance, and you could say there's not very much at all, because it's kind of going the wrong direction. There's acceptance of small applications that might help with a pesky business problem, or a place to put stuff, or a website that can allow better access. So in a sense, what they're doing is they're trying to solve the asset management problem in a sort of an organic style. And most organizations have deployed some kind of asset management system, but it's in the form of shared servers, cloud-based file storage services. We have content management systems being used as asset management systems, which is about as smart as trying to drive your website from Photoshop. Collaboration systems, SharePoint, email, physical hard drives, desktops. All these are small technology investments, and we've all done it. We all do it all the time. And I'm sure that, if you might recognize some of these in your organization. And users, because they need to get that satisfaction, they will advocate and procure these small to medium technology investments to deal with the asset management problem. And these are generally procured in some ways, because of the FUD factor. And everybody knows what the FUD factor is. It's fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Fear. Here are some quotes. I fear that I will not be able to find what I need, so I'll make my own place and tell others to go there. I fear that someone will delete my files, and I'll have to recreate it or rebuy it. I fear I won't have control over my media assets and my metadata. There's lots of other fears. Uncertainty. I am uncertain that everything I need will be accessible to me. I am uncertain that I won't be able to find it later. And doubt. Their department, those guys, those folks, they don't know about my business. They lack understanding about what my department does, so we'll just have to make our own. An organizational change will never work here. I can't justify the cost of a comprehensive solution and the organizational change that I might need to make. And so as we add those to the other side, on the no side, we can see that user expectations of how things should work are based on how they think and how satisfying that will make them act accordingly. And on the other side, some hindrances that tend to block more comprehensive solution initiatives. Pretty simple. So I'm going to outline 3 areas of which I concentrate that will work to build user confidence and deliver on the promise of DAM. And I have these slides online, so you don't need to make copious notes, and we'll take some questions afterwards if you have specifics around those. So the first one that I'd like to talk to you about is buy-in. We've all heard this concept, and there are three areas to work on in terms of buy-in. The first is strategic, the second is organizational, and the third is financial. Strategic. So this may be obvious, but believe it or not, most organizations are so mired in the urgency of delivery and sales and other aspects of their job that aligning a strategy can really be difficult. If you have more than 100 people in your organization, how many here have complete control over the strategy of their organization? So, not many, nobody, okay. Well, if that's the case, getting buy-in strategically at a top level in your organization is a really tough thing. But it is, you know, there are several ways I've seen this done, and it's typically, you know, it involves a lot of education and a lot of communication and a lot of selling in some ways. And, you know, getting strategic buy-in from top management is really, really key. And how do you do that? Well, making that case can be difficult, and if you want to talk about from some of those techniques, there are a lot of sessions here at Henry Stewart to help you do that. But what's even harder is to get organizational buy-in from the rest of the organization. So when I sit down with a team of users, I have an image in my mind that will help kind of guide the conversation about what they do, how they work, what can be improved, you know, that sort of thing. But really, it's a cultural thing. Believe it or not, some departments in some companies just don't get along with other people. Can you believe that? Getting departments to work together is important, but it requires something I call media therapy. We sometimes sit in a room and we talk about pain. We talk about workflow. We talk about I can't do my job, or I have to work on this system and this system and this system. I had somebody last week tell me that they have a Google Doc that will point people to a base camp that will point them to another Google Doc to show them the link to take them back to base camp. People have these ways that have been entrenched in the organization. So we have to look at what those are. What are those hindrances? Sometimes we find that another DAM initiative has been tried and failed, and so the well is poisoned on DAM initiatives. You know, are there competing factions for ownership of managing the media or owning the entrenched technologies? Is there widespread ignorance about even having a thing called asset management? I once sat down with a CIO of a very large insurance company, and I spent 30 minutes explaining how asset management was actually a real thing. He remained skeptical, but was convinced at the end that he was going to look into it. So it's interesting how much education is really needed to do that. So one thing that's maybe helpful is the DAM Foundation has put out a maturity model that will help to help you understand the level of understanding and awareness and maturity of your organization. This is free, so you can go on the DAM Foundation website and download it. And it helps through a very wide set of categories. Another organizational issue that kind of comes up, and especially with respect to buy-in, is metadata. You know, it's said that if you have it, but you can't find it, you don't have it. And metadata is really the reason people can't find things. And without having organizational buy-in on that metadata, that aligned quality metadata, you're going to have some real trouble. You know, you're going to hear a lot about metadata in other sessions, But we really have to align that metadata across the organization for users to collaborate, to understand how to search, describe, control, as well as placing their ultimate trust not only in a system but in your initiative. So don't underestimate how this affects user acceptance. And one last thing about creating organizational buy-in. Many organizations think that by merely putting in a system, your problem is solved. I would say that if technology was the answer, we would have solved this problem a long time ago. It's a ton of money and a lot of time to get these deployed, so it kind of comes as a shock that it takes an investment in organizational structures to maintain it. There are, at a high level, some areas that I would focus on. One is support. You need a support organization to handle the infrastructure, the access, connecting specific integrations within the organization. There's another group that I like to call the content services group. Typically, help desks, when you call them and you say, I can't access a website, they will go to work on figuring that out, and they have a pretty good sense of how that works. They might check your password, they might check your user credentials, whatever that is. If you say to them, I can't, when I converted my JPEG into a PNG, the red shifts a little bit. The help desk is going to ask you, have you restarted, or something like that, to help kind of as much as they can, but they're not geared toward that. So you really need a content services group within the organization to provide that central ownership of the asset management from a user perspective. And not only that, but this is a group that can be your metadata police, or your category police, or your user group police. And it's a group that so many companies and organizations just forget about. And it's so critical. Even if you start with one person, you'll see the need for it almost immediately. Another is the working team that helps to ensure that specific workflows with respect to the system are working properly and satisfying those user needs, like a group of photographers, or a photo editor and photographers, a video team, a presentation team, events team. Each one of those have specific needs and metadata and categories and all kinds of things that are exactly what they're looking for. And if you have those teams in place, and they can be loose, you can meet once a month, you can meet every so often, you can have a lunch. This is really key to ensuring that the issues are bubbling up from the group, and it has a better forum for developing those ongoing needs. And then finally, occasionally, you may need to bring in professional services to help with developing better strategies, with upgrades, with doing different distribution types of initiatives. You may need to do a growth plan. And also, there might be some back-end technical database situations that you need to have some help on that are specific to that asset management system or to some specific integrations. And the final one is financial buy-in. Now, I'll talk about this in greater detail today in another session. I think it's at 2:20, about getting buy-in from a CFO and stakeholders. It's really critical. I've seen where if a group has the best technology proposed, they have all of the governance, they have all of the back end, they've got working teams, they have the top management, but if it's too expensive and that individual department can't justify that, that investment, they're going to put something in that's small, departmental. They'll keep on their shared servers, they'll keep on their content management systems. They will do something just to be able to satisfy their needs, but do it in a way that doesn't help the overall organization. Seen it a lot. And so one way to do this is to understand that if we can develop a asset management platform strategy and build individual applications on top of that, and the CFO is on board with this because in the aggregate, she or he will be spending less money in the aggregate on storage and other applications and user management and upgrades and maintenance and other integrations, so that in the aggregate it's a controlled investment rather than just having a few thousand from every department every year. It also will help with reducing the amount of manual going from place to place to place if it is unified. So that type of financial strategy is really, really key. Another area to focus on besides buy-in is user experience. Now, we could spend all day on this topic, but truly, user experience will make or break the acceptance of it. This isn't a picture you want your users to look like. It's said that technology is good. Culture will trump technology, but user experience will trump everything. And there are 4 areas that I think are important. There's a lot of discussions around user experience. There's no way I could get into every bit of it. But I think there's some critical questions that you may want to ask when you go to look at user experience as a discipline. There's things like content, there's architecture, there's business objectives, but I'd like to simplify them. And it really comes down to value. Is it useful? Is it useful to me? Is it useful to my users? Is it useful to my content consumers? Does it have features? Does it have the connectivity? Is it flexible? Does it have the controls I need? Usability. Is it easy to use? Does it work? If I have a problem, can I get it fixed? We really haven't talked about technology much, but it really has to be fast. In the same way that user experience is so critical to the success, user abandonment is the leading cause of death in asset management initiatives. So a crashed system will have people scurrying back to their hard drives and their shared folders faster than you can believe. Adoptability. Is it easy to start using? And desirability. Is it attractive and satisfying? We've kind of all been there. We've gone to a new company and they say, oh, this is the system we get to use. And you look at it and it might look something like this. User interfaces is really, really important to the users. In fact, if you walk through this the vendor area, take note of how much they emphasize the user interface, because that's what everybody responds to. It's not the whole story, but it's about 80% of what people will choose when it comes down to selecting a vendor. Interfaces are important, but that can't solve the problem. It's almost like greens fees. It'll get you on the course, but the rest is really about adhering to the rules and the fundamentals. And the third area, besides buy-in and user experience, that I'd like to talk about is a Japanese word. Does anybody know what this is? Kaizen? It's a Japanese word for continuous improvement. And it helps to give you a perspective on how do you approach the initiative, the overall initiative. How do you manage expectations? Proving that the strategy is actually working, proving that the technology is able to scale and it works, providing solutions that limit the scope but are incrementally satisfying the business needs, so that over a 3 to 5 year period, you've gone from investing in small, disconnected applications to an overall enterprise strategy that works for multiple stakeholders. And so there are 3 areas that I think are important, and this may deviate a little bit from my Six Sigma advocacy a little bit, but I think it's important to use this as a philosophy in many ways. The first one is around communication. You need to continually improve communication. One way I've seen this work is to start with a group of committed and motivated stakeholders, people like yourselves, people that are your friendlies in your organization. Communicate and gain support internally, and then extend it out. Find, fellow stakeholders in other groups. They may have budget that they have decided that they're going to spend on another asset management system. Determine, the ARCHI, the accountable, the responsible, the informed, and the consulted. Figure out who those people need to be and work to satisfy those. Determine the right level of communication, the right groups, and what should be expected. We talk a lot about boiling the ocean, okay? So you may get here someday, but it may take you a while to get there. So another aspect of it is continually improving the platform of services. We often warn teams about don't try to take on every single use case, don't try to take on every single asset. Start with a high impact, low risk, prove the concept, and see what happens. A lot of vendors, a lot of teams get excited about the possibilities of it, and they decide that they're going to have this handle every asset, every workflow, every user. It's going to heal the sick, restore sight to the blind, make cherry cobbler. Whatever it is, you may get there, you may not. But the idea is, if your idea is to start with everything, I would highly encourage you to rethink that. The best thing that could happen is that you put something in, people get wildly excited about it, and they want to join your merry tribe of asset management stakeholders. The worst thing that can happen is that people start using it and it becomes wildly successful and people want to join your merry tribe of asset management stakeholders, and you can't scale. You can't solve their problem. A lot of organizations will find that they get it all right, but they don't choose something that will scale to their needs. And so I would try to think about, if this works and it is wildly successful, what is our world going to look like then? So we see this a lot with some cloud-based tools where you start out on AWS and it's pretty cheap. People are kind of using it, and then over time you get a bill that's 10 times what you thought it was going to be. And then it's like moving out of a giant house. It's a real pain to move it out and to try something else. And if it grows and it can't scale, it's a real source of frustration. The third thing to continually improve is the value to the business. Oftentimes a business case will outline the value to the business, but how often do we really go back into that business case and we kind of say, what did it really do? We said it was going to save $14 million, but how much did it really save us? I have never seen it done. I don't think I've ever in my whole life, as many business cases as I've gone through, they've gone back and said it really did what it said it was going to do. And that will, in some ways, it may provide a hindrance to your CFO to give you more money. So by measuring the effectiveness of the initiative in terms of 5 key areas of benefit, you'll be able to grow the value of the business and maintain a relationship with your leadership team, including the finance team, when a new investment is desired by the group to grow, to upgrade, to scale, to increase the value to the business. And what are those 5 areas of benefit? You'll have to come to the session at 2:20 to find out. But by investing in these 3 areas, in the ways that I've kind of described, these are not comprehensive by any means. There are a lot of nuances to it. We haven't even talked about politics. Politics can be a real killer, as I well know. But I think you'll find that you have a pretty good handle on influencing your users, satisfying your users. And your situation may be far more complex than this. And I've seen some organizations with some real challenges, but much of it comes down to understanding the users, understanding their expectations. Users, they can be our friend or they can be our enemy. But like any other relationship, it takes trust, it takes understanding, communication to work out the issues and to work and solve the problem. I appreciate your time. Thanks.